Okay, everyone, it is 5:05. We're going to get started now. Thanks to everyone for taking a little bit of time out of your summer to jump into the meeting to learn a little bit more about what school's going to be like this year. So we really appreciate it. I'm here with Ann Corin, who's our new assistant principal. She'll be monitoring the chat. So as I'm kind of narrating the slides, feel free to ask questions in the chat. But we also have stopping points throughout the presentation where if you want to chime in and share your thoughts, that's great. As lovely as my voice is, to listen to just my voice and Ann's voice for an hour might be a little bit much. So we welcome and appreciate parents who might just want to ask a question in the large group. So feel free to do that at the appropriate time. So here we go. So we have, here's our agenda for tonight. We have 4 things we're going to cover. The first is just a quick thing, just to give you guys a sense of what we're dealing with on a sort of a daily basis as we start to open school during a pandemic. Then our next point will be what's the daily school experience going to look like for our kids, both hybrid and remote. Then we're going to go to some questions, some sort of specific questions about COVID and about like what happens if my kid is sick, how long do they need to be out of school, that kind of thing. And then finally, we'll wrap up with all the other stuff, all the other parts of school, sports clubs, counseling, all that good stuff. And we'll finish up. And like I mentioned, throughout the presentation, there'll be plenty of opportunities for you guys to ask questions. And at the end, Ann and I have been staying on for an additional 3 or 4 or 5 minutes. If folks aren't comfortable asking in a large group, they're able to ask the questions at the end of the meeting in a smaller setting. So here we go. So when we sent the invite for this meeting out last Wednesday, this is what has changed since that day. So since Wednesday of last week, the state came out and said there's going to be mandatory flu shots for all Massachusetts students. The state also came out and said that they're going to provide on-site rapid testing at schools if needed. The state, after sitting on the decision all summer long, decided last week that sports are going to be allowed to go forward. The state also said that the district should require teachers to be in their classrooms to teach, but the state also said that the district should allow their kids to be in the classroom as they teach. So I share this with you just to give you kind of a sense of the daily changes that we're facing, both at the high school and on the district level. And it's just a constant barrage at this point of decisions that are made, closer and closer to the start of school. And we kind of have to adjust on the fly to them. So we apologize in advance if like on one day we say one thing, but on the next day we have to adjust. But we are kind of adapting as we go. I was listening to a podcast today, and someone was describing the situation as usually, from the parents' perspective, school is just kind of this omnipresent thing that just exists, where kids go in, they come back, you ask them what they learned today, they say nothing, you know that that's not true, and it's kind of like just a calming part of everyone's existence. And what's happened with this whole COVID thing is that everyone is getting to see all the sort of the different intricacies that go into making the school work. And so it's kind of like our guts are spilled out, and you're saying that we have to worry about transportation and schedules and health and safety and yada, 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 all that good stuff. And then what that does, obviously, is it causes a level of unrest. So we appreciate that this is sort of a challenging time for parents and kids, and we're trying to do the best we can to sort of mitigate that stress. But we know that, we left perfect, on March 12th last year, and we're just kind of doing our best to get back to there as we go along. So, the words I've been using are sort of like patience, grace, and flexibility. And I think we can all kind of lead with that. We're going to get through this year just fine, and our kids will be in a good spot going forward. So this is just a little bit of a sense to give you a picture of what's going on at the state level and with our schools as we're trying to navigate this most unusual school year. So what will school look like for our students this year? So we're going to start with the hybrid model, since that's what we're going to start with in Sutton, explain what those 2 weeks are going to look like, and then we're going to go to the remote model. And then at that point, it will be a stopping point, and we'll fire out some questions that you guys have put into the chat. So here's the daily schedule for the hybrid model. You can see that the arrival time is the class start time, starts at 7:50. We're asking parents not to get onto the campus at the earliest until 7:20. The doors will be locked until 7:20. That's a safety and health protocol. So please don't drop your students off any earlier than that, because they will be outside regardless of the weather. So we're asking folks to be mindful of that time. There'll be staggered drop-offs. We're going to be asking, we'll get, again, more specific information about the drop-off procedures. The pickup procedures will come out as we get closer. But in general, the buses do arrive in a staggered manner. They'll be arriving no earlier than 7:20. If two buses arrive at the same time, in the olden days, all the kids would pile off the bus and they all come in the building. Well, in COVID land, one bus empties at a time and kids come in the building 6 feet apart. So buses will arrive. We're going to ask parents to arrive sometime between 7:30 and 7:40, and there'll be a specific area in the back parking lot where if you're dropping off your student, you can drop them off in the back parking lot. Students will come in to the door by the art rooms, and then student drivers, we're going to ask them to come in close to 7:50, and if they're 1 or 2 minutes late, that's going to be fine, as long as they're not abusing it. So those kids will come in closer to 7:50. They'll park in the parking lot in the back and then come in through the auditorium door. The minute that you're on campus, you're expected to put your mask on. So as you're walking into the building, your mask should be on. When you walk into the building, you'll have to sanitize your hands, and then you go directly to A block. A block in the hybrid model is a 75-minute block. There is no mask break in the middle of class. We're asking students to stay in the class for that instructional time throughout the entire period. Students who need to go to the bathroom, that obviously is allowed, one at a time. There'll be a limit on the number of kids who can be in the bathroom at one time. So at the end of that period, then there's a mask break. So what will happen at that point, teachers will stagger dismissal their kids so we don't have all of the kids in the hallway all at one time. So just in this example, from A block from 9:05 to 9:13, that's the first mask break. So kids will leave their classroom and go outside for their mask break as they transition to B block. So for example, you might have a class on the Putnam Hill side of the building, and your next period class might be in a science classroom, which is on the Boston Road side. So you would leave, you'd go out of the building, you take off your mask, you could chat with your friends for the 6-minute walk to get to class, staying 6 feet apart with your mask off. There'll be staff outside to monitor that. Then as you get ready to enter the door, sanitize your hands, put your mask back on, and away you go to B block. And that's how generally the flow of the day will go. If there's inclement weather and students don't want to go outside for their mask break, then those mask breaks will happen in the cafeteria, the gymnasiums, and the auditorium. We are getting tents, so kids can have mask breaks outside as well, but then I was just told today that because the entire world is ordering tents, those tents are back ordered to late October at the earliest. So I don't know how many kids are going to want to be outside in the freezing cold doing the mask breaks, but I guess we'll find out. So that's that. Then that goes to B block. They go back. They go to the B block again. They transition to C block. Then they go to lunch. There are 3 lunches. So some kids will go directly to lunch, and the other kids will go to the C block class, and they'll have a later lunch. At lunch, when you arrive to lunch, if you need to buy a lunch, you'll go to the cafeteria. It'll be grab-and-go style lunches. There's not going to be any panini presses or special orders. It's basically, do you want the hamburger with cheese today for lunch, yes or no? If yes, grab the box and pay for it and leave. If you don't need to buy lunch at school, then you can go directly to the gymnasium, which we've set up to be the cafeteria during this period. Once you're in the gymnasium for lunch, you'll be sitting at a desk by yourself, 6 feet apart or more from your classmates. You'll have assigned seats because we need, for contact tracing, we need to know who's sitting where at all times. At that point, once you're in the cafeteria with your lunch, you can take your mask off, and then you can begin eating and have lunch. When you're in the lunchroom, you can talk to the people beside you, but you won't be able to get up and move around. You won't be able to go see your friend on the other side of the gym. You're really just kind of expected to stay in your seat for the entire period. At the end of lunch, you throw your lunch away, and then you walk to your class, and then you go to D block. D block happens, and then the end of the day is at 1:50. We'll start dismissing kids, and dismissal will be staggered just like arrival. And so, for example, when the bus 1 arrives, someone will come over the intercom and say, "Bus 1 is here. Bus 1 students are dismissed." They'll go through, and they'll be dismissed. Then we might say, "Okay, students who are being picked up by their parents, you're dismissed," and then those students would leave. And then we might say, "Student drivers, you're dismissed." We'll stagger that out. Part of this, we need to kind of feel that part out as we see how many kids are doing each one. to get the best system in place, but we'll stagger the dismissal as well. So that'll be the typical day, in class. Again, mask is worn at all time. Our primary goal is safety. We need to keep our students and staff safe. So a lot of the things that we're doing, everything that we're doing that's different than we normally do, is because of the requirements that doing school during a pandemic is placing upon us, and the requirements that we need to have in place so that if someone does come down with COVID and they are sitting next to your son or daughter, we're able to tell you, hey, there was a student in the class, he had COVID, you might want to get your son or daughter tested. And we can only do that if we're pretty sure where everyone is as much of the day as we possibly can. So class time for those 2 weeks, for the first 2 weeks that we have, September 14th and 28th, there'll be a combination of starting English class, starting math class, getting kids excited about school, and teaching them the processes that they're going to need when we switch to remote. So kids will be worked through a reminder on how to use Google Classroom, how to submit their assignments on Google Classroom, all that good stuff, the regular ins and outs of school. Part of the challenge with hybrid school is that a lot of the best teaching practices that we know work for kids are kind of outlawed. So we can't have kids working closely in a group. We can't have kids up in front of the classroom presenting. Everyone kind of needs to stay in their sort of contained space, again, because we need to be pretty sure of where kids are when they're learning, so that if there's an outbreak, we're able to trace it effectively. When they're home for the 3 days, so let's pretend your son or daughter is in cohort A, they'll come in Monday and Tuesday, September 14th and 15th, and then the next 3 days they'll be doing independent work assigned by the teacher at home by themselves. It'll look a lot like the remote learning in the spring, although the requirements and the standards will be nothing like the remote learning that happened in the spring. I said last night at the meeting last night, if I could wave a wand, and when it comes to schools, and I could do one thing, I would erase the phrase remote learning from people's mind, because I think some of the misconception about what remote learning is going to look like this year is what remote learning looked like last year. And remote learning this year is just going to be very different, whether it's remote learning when we all switch after these 2 weeks, or the remote learning kids are going to be doing when they're home working independently. So, for example, I used to be an English teacher, so my work for my kids when I send them home for 3 days might be to read part of the novel, to write some responses, but then I also might say, I want you to work with these 4 students, and you guys are going to present when we're back in class on Monday. As a group, you guys are going to present your projects via the computer. So that part will be relatively typical, but again, because of the hybrid model, you're doing 2 days in class and then 2 days at home. All right, so this is a good spot to stop and ask questions. So Anne's gonna fire some questions out at me.
Sure. Okay, first question. How will the school handle those who refuse to have their child take the flu vaccination?
Michelle has said, Michelle Donovan, who's our school nurse, it is a requirement. We know we are a school, we're not a police state. We're expecting people to do what's being asked. I don't have the exact information about the flu vaccine. There are obviously exemptions, religious exemptions for flu vaccine.
Medical exemptions as well.
Medical exemptions as well. But as far as a clear answer on that, I do not know. That's a good question for Mr. Friend, because it's going to it would be the same response at the high school, the middle school, and the early learning center.
Right. And families have until December 31st to get children vaccinated.
Correct.
Okay. Another health and safety. Why are we not doing temperature checks upon arrival?
According to Michelle and the research that I've seen, temperature checks are not an accurate indicator of COVID, and they've sort of ruled them out. The state has also ruled those out as well.
Okay, this I know is going to get answered, but I just don't want it to get buried. Can a student's schedule be changed if they were put into classes they didn't request? And who would I contact to discuss this?
Well, yes and yes, although if they got put into a class, they definitely requested it, because that's the only way we can make a schedule. It could have been their third request, but it was a request that they made. But we'll cover schedules when we get to guidance later on in the presentation.
All right. Can a student eat outside if they want?
As of right now, no, because we currently don't have the staffing to watch the bathroom, the cafeteria, the hallways, the outside, and everywhere else that we're going to need to sort of manage. Also, there's questions about how we do contact tracing if they're eating outside. Sue Dame had the idea, we had a department chair meeting the other day, Sue Dame had the idea of like drawing a grid on the soccer field, and every kid would be assigned their own individual 6x6 square. I certainly would rather kids eat outside if we can make it work, but right now we haven't figured out a way with the available staffing to make it work. We'll keep looking into it and talk to Michelle about what's required via contact tracing. And if we can provide that opportunity for kids, then we will.
Okay, during hybrid, will the kids will not have a set schedule for the 3 days off, question mark?
Correct. They will be expected to do work the 3 days off, and the teacher, because they'll be part of the Google Classroom that the teacher is providing for their A block, B block, C block, and D block, they'll have access to all that information. But the work is just expected to be done, whether you do that at 8 a.m. when school starts, or you choose to do it at 2 p.m. and like work all night. That's up to you as an individual kid. We can't manage that. But there is no set schedule making them get off, because the teachers who are at home, the teacher is teaching the other set of students, so they can't be live streaming with the kids who are at home as well.
Okay. Why are we doing blocks when we will end up remote? And just a comment that, having AP classes the first half of the year doesn't help the students when they have to test in the spring. So why are we doing blocks when we will end up remote?
So the reason why we're doing blocks is one of the pieces of feedback that we got from teachers, students, and parents last year with the remote learning was that it was a lot to manage 7 classes at one time. And that's our typical schedule. In fact, one of the things that I always say when we talk to kids and parents is that there's no other time in your life where you need to manage one particular very discrete task for an hour, only for an hour. A bell rings and then tells you to do something else for another hour. And in fact, when kids are going to college, and if I have a bunch of junior parents and senior parents here, this is what college is going to be like. They're not going to be taking 7 classes a day. They're going to be taking 2 classes a day, 1 class a day. My daughter had her college schedule set up so that she had 0 classes on Friday, but she had all of her classes during the week, and she had 4 classes, a couple days. So this definitely much more mirrors what they're going to be expected to do in college. The block schedule we covered that in previous meetings. The reason why we went to a block schedule is because it does limit what we're asking people to manage during a pandemic. And it also then limits when kids are in person, it limits the amount of contact that they're going to be giving. They're going to be exposed to from both their peers and the staff's perspective. Many schools across the Commonwealth use the block schedule as their regular schedule. So I always use Tantascwa. It's the one that I know the most. And in fact, a lot of the schools in the Valley have also transitioned to a block schedule. So Nipmuc has transitioned to a block schedule. BMR has transitioned to a block schedule, exactly for the reasons that I stated. And in those schools where they have block schedule as their typical schedule, one of the, sort of the realities that you have to deal with is, you could have AP language in the fall, but then the test isn't until the spring. So what we're going to be doing, and what I know other schools do, is that for folks who have AP in the fall, but then have the test in the spring, we'll be offering some AP boot camps before the test, so the kids can get refreshed on the information that they were exposed to in the fall and right before the test in the spring. And then I also know that the AP teachers who have the kids in the spring are going to provide optional opportunities for kids who have in the fall, so that they could stay current in their subject matter before they land with them in the spring. So it's not ideal, but again, as I've been saying, we left ideal on March 13th. So, but we do believe this is the best schedule given the situation and given the realities of what we're faced with.
Okay. What will students who choose remote for the first 2 weeks do during those first 2 hybrid weeks?
So if you are choosing, and this is, Ann and I made a lot of calls today for this exact reason. So if you chose remote, but you chose remote just for the first 2 weeks, and you kind of know that if we come back on November 1st or December 1st or October 15th or March 1st or whatever it is, your kid's going to come back in with the rest of the group. So what will happen in that instance is your son or daughter will get the Gmail, Google Classroom invite, just along with all the other students in there, A block class, B block class, C block class. The teacher will provide assignments for those students via the Google Classroom. On the Wednesdays when nobody's in school, we're working with teachers so that they provide a chance to like check in with their A block, B block, C block kids who are never going to be in the building, just so we can get a little FaceTime so teachers can see the kids who they haven't seen in person, check in with them, answer some early questions, and then make sure they're all set up. So for those first 2 weeks, kids will be working primarily independently, working on their own with the Wednesday check-in and after-school support from teachers that's provided. Once we switch to remote, then everyone's in the same class, and you'll just join the A block class with the other 20 kids who are in the class, and you'll be at the same point, and away you go.
Okay. How do kids get help when they're remote? You just addressed that a little bit, but.
So every teacher has, by contract, at least 2 days after school for 30 minutes. I can tell you, in my 8 years of high school, there are far more teachers that spend 3, 4 days, 5 days after school, and much longer than half an hour. But minimally, there's 2 days. Wednesday is also a day when extra help can be provided, particularly during this hybrid period. So teachers will be setting up their after-school time that will be remote. Because all the kids have to leave the building by 2:05 and all staff have to leave the building by 2:05 so that the custodians can come in and clean. Extra help might happen at 3 o'clock. Let's say I'm Christina Gamble and I'm a pre-calculus teacher. Extra help might happen Tuesdays and Thursdays from 3:30 to 4:30. And then that's when extra help will be available. And then teachers always post their extra help sessions as part of their syllabus, and every teacher will have that information for the kids on the first day of class.
Okay. I'm not sure if this question is about the hybrid model or the remote model, but we can address it for the hybrid model right now. So when my child is at home on a remote day, no teachers will be teaching them.
When your child is at home on
a remote day, no teachers will be teaching them, but there's a difference between the hybrid remote days and the remote learning days.
When we get to remote teaching, the full remote model in a minute, we'll address this. But yes, during hybrid, because you're home, the teacher, I'll just keep picking on Christina Gamble, she'll love it. Christina Gamble is teaching half the kids on Monday and Tuesday and the other half of the kids on Thursday, Friday. So she can't be teaching both sets of kids at the same time. So for those 2 weeks, for the 3 days that you're home independently, you will not have a teacher working with you. Once we go remote, it's 5 days a week of instruction with teachers.
Right, on a schedule. Lots of generous offers to donate tents, which we appreciate. We can look at that after. Are any other schools in Central Mass doing what Sutton is doing?
I guess as far as the 2-week hybrid, then remote, I don't think so. As far as transitioning to the block schedule, like I just mentioned, Nipmuc and BMR off the top of my head are two schools that I'm aware of the transition to block scheduling.
Okay. There's a question about grading work and mandatory logging onto Zoom, so I think that can be addressed in the next section.
Yep.
Will you continue to offer SPPs? Yep,
we're going to cover that too.
Okay, because the comment is with only 4 classes, this parent is concerned that only having 3 classes will negatively impact the college application.
They're not going to only have 3 classes. They'll have 8 classes throughout the course of the year.
Right. Yep. Is the extra help after school through Zoom?
Yes.
Oh, there was a question earlier that I missed. If kids signed up for hybrid through the survey, can they change their mind before school starts? Can they change that?
Just send me an email, mccarthyt@suttonschools.net, and we'll just switch you on the survey. There's no problem at all.
All right. Will the kids that are remote, hold on. Will the kids that are remote be taught the same as the hybrid kids until it's time to go back? Will that be by their Sutton teachers? That's in the next section.
Unless you're talking about the kids who are doing the independent work for 2 weeks,
right?
While hybrid's in session, they will not be taught by Sutton teachers. They'll be doing independent work. It's provided by Sutton teachers who will provide instructions and guide them along for those 2 weeks. But FaceTime with the Sutton teachers for those kids will start when we all go remote on September 30th.
Okay. What if our child was only, we'll save that. I'm going to ask it now so it doesn't get buried. What if our child was only assigned to 3 classes? Are you considering putting seniors who are applying to college, if they have 4 very light classes in the fall? Schedules are looking very light for seniors in the fall.
If you have we'll cover schedule in a bit, and it is a change, and I know it's going to be hard for us to kind of conceptualize because we're used to seeing the 7 classes, and so now you're only seeing the 4. But colleges are made aware of the adjustments that we're all making to accommodate the virus. And I'm sure everyone on this call is aware of the adjustments that colleges are making because of the virus themselves. And so when we submit applications to schools, schools are aware of the classes that we're offering and the opportunities that kids have, and that's what matters. Because there are, if there are, 182 high schools in the Commonwealth, there's not 2 of them that run the same. And there's always little nooks and crannies in each one. So we can cover that when we get to the end of the presentation. But if you have a question about your schedule, the first person to contact is either Ms. Bioki or Ms. Miller, and they can kind of walk you through the options.
And that's a club question, and we will answer that later on. So I think we are all set.
Good. So not surprisingly, more questions for hybrid because it's just more confusing and it's just more involved than remote. So when we switch to remote on September 30th, it's just a lot simpler across the board. So every day, Monday through Friday, students were getting up at 8 o'clock and they're logging on to their A block class. On Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, they have 80-minute blocks. You can see that the first block is 8 to 9:20, and then there's a screen break, a bit like a mandatory screen break in between each period. Although I can tell you that no kid is going to be looking at a screen for 6 hours. So teachers will be designing lessons that might say, okay, checking in at the beginning and then saying, okay, I want everyone to kind of like put your screen away and read the assignment, read the passage that I provided for you over there, and then come back in 10 minutes and then we're going to connect. So kids will be, even though they have a full day of class from 8 to 2, they're not going to be looking at a screen from 8 to 2. There's a lunch break built in there as well. And then extra help when we go to remote, that will happen at 2 o'clock, I imagine, in most cases, because we're already in school and teachers are already there, and that's how it's going to work. So that's every Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Wednesday, we do have the half day on Wednesday to provide teachers the time they need to sort of adjust what they've been doing to manage the virus. But there are mandatory check-ins for kids from 8 to 9:45. So there's half-an-hour classes where kids are checking in. Those sessions will be a little less structured. Kids will check in, take attendance, and then the teacher might say, okay, Mary, Jim, Sally, and Sue, you're going to stay back with me, and we're going to go over your project. And then in 15 minutes, I'm going to ask Mike, Ralph, Jamal, and Ted, you're going to come in and you're going to over your project. But the rest of you, you're going to get into your groups and you're going to work on your project for the next half an hour. So that day might be a little bit more of a working day, but kids are going to be required to show up every day at 8 and 8:35 and 9:10, 9:45, take attendance, and then the teacher will give them the assignment for the day, and then off they go. So remote learning looks a lot more like a traditional schedule. Kids are going to get up at a certain time, walk through their schedule, it ends at a certain time, and then that's just kind of the schedule for remote learning. I forgot to change the date again, Anne.
Thought of that when you started.
So remote learning is starting September 30th, I believe, the Monday after the last day of hybrid. So remote learning there's live instruction 5 days a week. Like I mentioned, there's definitely not going to be kids looking at screens for 6 hours a day, but they'll be scheduled and unscheduled, unscheduled is a bad word. Teachers will be using screen time appropriately. With all of this, like I said, this year, grades, homework, tests, projects, the whole 9 yards, all the things that kids love about school. That's not what they really love about school. But all those things are part of what we're doing this year. So if the kid submits an assignment and gets a 76 and wants an opportunity to make it up, depending on the teacher's makeup policy, he might have the opportunity to do that because the 76 matters and students are going to be required to give it their full effort so that they get good grades. And like the parent who asked earlier, that's why we have extra help. So if kids are struggling with a concept or a topic, they schedule time with the teachers and they get that extra support after school. Class time in remote learning, Again, unlike the spring, everyone's required to log on at certain times throughout the day. They're going to be required, at least at the beginning of the class, to show their face so that I can check in with you, see you're okay. If kids need to use virtual backgrounds because their room's messy and they don't want someone to see, that's completely fine. But the teacher's got to make eye contact with the kid, at least at the beginning of the period, so they can see that they're okay and see that they're there and ready to work. And then, like in any class, right now, I can't really see. Actually, can I see? Let's see. If I know if there are 81 people in this meeting right now, I could, stop sharing my screen, go find somebody, and I could say, Barbara Burek, what did you think about what I just said? And then require Barbara Burek to respond. That's going to be part of what we do too. So kids are going to have to stay engaged in the lesson and not be like, shut down their screen so you can't see their face, beyond playing video games, and all of a sudden, Ms. Gamble says, what'd you get for number 3? And they haven't done any of the work. There'll be group work and opportunities for additional support. And just like in regular school, there'll be time for independent work to apply what's learned. There'll be virtual group work, and then there's after school time to get additional support from teachers. So questions on remote.
Okay, so there was a question about if we go back full-time in the winter, what will the schedule look like? Still 4 blocks or back to 7 periods? We've adopted the block schedule for the year. I answered that in the chat. Are kids getting textbooks and workbooks and materials from teachers?
Yes, so if your student comes in for the hybrid model for the 2 weeks, they'll get their materials that they'll need for the next at least month from their teachers. That includes textbooks, etc. Like I know, for example, the English department is planning on giving their kids every book that they're going to be reading for the first half of the year, so that they have everything they need, so regardless of how long. If your son or daughter is not coming in for those 2 weeks and they're going to stay home, then we'll have an opportunity for you or someone to come in and pick up what you need, so your student has those materials at home for the start of school.
Okay. How does a family with multiple students remote learning have set times to log in?
So I'm guessing that means if the question means that you have limited devices, the district should be coming out with a procedure for families to request devices. My guess and my hope would be that if you have 4 kids in the district and only 1 computer in the home, that you guys would get priority to make sure that kids have access to devices. That sounds like a pretty specific question, and so if you want to reach out to me individually, if you have concerns about that, feel free to touch base with me, and I can put you in touch with Dan Durgan, our tech director.
Okay. How will report cards be issued? 4 quarters or 2 semesters?
Both. 4 quarters. So you'll get a report card for quarter 1, and then a report card for quarter 2, and then that report card is semester 1. Those two marking periods, and then quarter 3 and quarter 4 will follow that.
Okay. Do the remote kids start on the 14th, or do they have to wait until the hybrid is finished?
Nope, remote kids start school on the 14th. Like I said, they'll get an email from their teachers inviting them to the Google Classroom. Their teachers starting on September 14th will have assignments for them to complete and work for them to hand in. It just won't be that they just won't see their teacher's face every day until we get to remote.
Okay. The senior parents would like to know about the specifics for senior year, guidance, support, assistance with college applications, just so we have that. I don't know if you want to do that now or.
We have a whole section on guidance later. So that's a legitimate question. We have that answer, and we'll get to it when we get to that part of the presentation.
Yep. And how were half-year classes scheduled?
So there are no half-year classes, or I guess everything's a half-year class. And so electives are all a half year. So an elective carries the same weight as a graduation requirement. Just a year ago, we transitioned when we changed our graduation requirements and added some of the new ones. We transitioned a lot of our electives from full year electives to half year electives to give kids more choice. So teachers so I'll pick an example. Criminal justice used to be a full year elective. And so Mr. Whittier had developed curriculum to go from September to June. When we pared it down to a half-year course, he then adjusted the curriculum so that it was more of a bite-sized version of criminal justice. Now that we're going back for this 1 year to a full-year course or a full semester course, he's going to add back in that curriculum so kids will just get more, a deeper dive into those elective classes.
Okay, this is one we talk about all the time. Is there an exit strategy out of remote learning, and what will dictate our transition back to physical, in-person / hybrid learning?
Yep, so the district, the superintendent is working on the metrics that will be used to move us back in to hybrid learning. I don't have those right now because they have not been set by the district and the superintendent and the school committee. But obviously the goal is to get us all back into the building as soon as possible, and it makes sense.
Okay, so can you explain a little bit more about what about the half year? What about the classes that are only half year, like civics, financial wellness? Will they only be 1 quarter? Can you just clarify that, please?
Nope, all courses are half-year courses. So civics is a half-year course. Financial wellness is a half-year course. In the past, they were a half-year course, but then that's when we had, more. We weren't having a block schedule. So in the block schedule, all courses are a half-year course.
Okay. And then it's just a question about activities, which is coming up. So we can talk about that then. Oh, hold on. How will an SPP work when in full remote?
We'll get to that when we get to SPP.
Okay. Oh yeah, I forgot that was a section.
We're good?
Yep.
Right. Okay, so COVID protocol. So Michelle is not here with us tonight. She's actually on a training with Boston Children's Hospital in Boston, which has been beneficial. So basically, here are the questions that most families are wondering. What happens if my student wakes up and doesn't feel well? What happens if my student goes to school and gets home sick? What happens if a student in my child's class is sent home sick? What happens if one of my child's teachers is sick? So what Michelle has basically told us is that in all of these instances, the default answer is going to be a note from your doctor. So whether it's a telehealth visit or an in-person visit, that's going to be required in order to come back to school. So if you wake up and your student doesn't feel well, we're asking you to keep him home. And then if he stays home, you're going to talk to Michelle. You're going to say, well, he has seasonal allergies. And then that will be something that we're aware of, and Michelle will work with you on a plan. If you send your student to school and they're sent home sick, then basically because every symptom is a COVID symptom, then they're going to need to be either stay home for 14 days or have a negative test to say that they're able to come back in and be asymptomatic and fever-free. So Michelle has lots of protocols. I don't want to get into the weeds on it because honestly, it's not my area of expertise. But there are lots of protocols on the website, which I'll share with you guys at the end, where you can kind of see the exact protocol for what will happen in each of these situations. Mr. Friend is very, he's being very conservative on the health and safety piece as far as notifying families if there's someone in the class that's sent home sick, because if he feels that if a student is sent home sick and your son or daughter was 6 feet away from them for 75 minutes when we're in the hybrid model, that you should have the right to know that because you might want to then get your son or daughter tested. If a student is sent home sick in a class and because we have required seating or assigned seats, and we know exactly who's going to be in each seat, each day, each period, that allows us to track. So if someone does get sent home sick or if someone does test positive for COVID, we're able to reach out to families and say, a student that was in a class with your son or daughter was sent home sick today, just FYI. And then at that point, that leaves it to families to decide what they want to do with that information. For teachers, it goes the same way. Teachers are being encouraged that if they wake up and they have a symptom, they are being asked to stay home and then get cleared medically to come back in. If they get COVID, they're obviously out for an extended period. It's the same protocols for teachers that there is for kids. When in the classrooms, we're going to get to the video in a second, but in the classrooms, it's going to be a pretty clear area where it's the teacher section and the kids section, so that the kids aren't going to be allowed to cross sort of the demarcation line, to try to kind of keep those areas clean so that teachers are not picking up contaminants from the 55 kids or the 60 kids who are walking through their door that day. But that's just sort of a protocol that we're adopting. So in general, I would say if you have a question, a specific question, I mean, I know sometimes people have very specific medical issues and there's sort of like carve-outs. I would reach out to Michelle. She's fantastic, very easy to work with, and we'll get back to you relatively quickly if you have a question about any of this stuff. But there's also pages of protocols on the website as far as all to answer these questions about how we're dealing with COVID if students or staff are sick. Questions?
So everyone in the class will be notified.
And did he say everyone or just the people who are 6 feet away? I think he
Everyone.
I think he said everyone.
Oh,
Did he say everyone?
I think he was talking about two different letters. If kid in the class was dismissed as being sick, or if kid in the class tested positive. So there's like, I think he was erring on the side of caution to everyone.
Okay, everyone.
All right, and the next question is about SATs, and that's probably coming up. So any other questions on health and safety?
All right.
Yep.
All right, so then the other stuff. A lot of these questions are in the pile of the other stuff. So athletics. So as I mentioned in the beginning, last week, the state, first the state came out with guidelines for youth sports that put sports in either low risk, moderate risk, or high risk categories. That guidance, again, that's also available on the website. So for example, cross country is a low risk sport and football is a high risk sport, but soccer is a moderate risk sport, if we're just going to talk about fall sports. So once they came out with that, then the MIAA, which is the governing body for athletics in the state, they go to work, and now they're coming out with sport-specific rules to guide schools if they're going to be adopting sports going forward. Monday, the school committee will be discussing sports. Sports are in the budget. We fully planned on having sports. We know that kids are participating in club sports right now, and I've had calls about captain's practices that shouldn't be happening in other communities. So we know full and well that kids are participating in sports outside. The sports that we're going to be offering in the fall won't be anything like the sports that we normally do. So there's no playoffs or anything like that. That the athletic directors have created these sort of like geographical pods, so that you're not sort of going all over the Central Mass to play different teams, that you're kind of sticking with the teams that are within a sort of like a 10 or 15 mile radius of you. So for example, Northbridge is not in the DVC, but they might be one of the schools that we play in this pod system. And the goal is just to give kids an opportunity to play a sport that they love and give them a little something back. So I'm hopeful that we're able to offer sports and the kids can do that. There's a big difference between having 11 kids on a soccer field and having 385 kids in the same building all day long, from my perspective. So I think, it could happen, but that's a decision for school committee, and we'll know more on Monday. Once the school committee and Mr. Friend make a decision on Monday, then the next step will be hearing from the DVC in Central Mass and figuring out if sports do go forward, figuring out how exactly that's going to look for soccer and for cross country and for golf. The state is actually putting in a fourth season because football is basically not manageable in the current situation. So they're creating a fourth season for football and competitive cheer. And they might put volleyball there too. And that will happen between winter and spring. So that's also on the table. So that's everything I know about athletics. I don't have a lot of information beyond that, and I'll know a lot more after Monday's school committee meeting. Along the same line, clubs and activities. We are going to still be having clubs and activities. And many of those groups met virtually in the spring, and we're going to hope they're going to continue virtually here in the fall. I know Mr. Loss, for example, the drama club met several times, Connections met several times, student council met several times. So we're hopeful to give kids an opportunity to do something else beyond academics as we start up in the school year. So those will probably happen. Most of those will happen virtually. Some may happen in person, depending on guidance that comes out, to be determined.
Yes, there was a question about drama. Will the drama be able to have their plays? So that falls under that category.
Ms. Corrin and I asked about that today. Currently, the answer is maybe, like all things. But I think we kind of have to wait and see what the state says for those kinds of activities. Again, because if you're inside, if you're on, I'm just thinking right now out loud, but if you're on the stage, you have to be wearing a mask. So could drama happen outside with no mask? I guess if Mr. Loss wants to do cinema verite and have an outside performance, I guess he could do that. But I guess we'll have to see.
And what about NHS before you go on? Was that
NHS? Thank you for that. So NHS really did get whacked because of the timing with all of this. So Ms. Fleming is our new NHS advisor. We are going to be sending emails to students who were accepted into NHS and who were not accepted into NHS either the first or second day of school. Once that happens, then there'll be a process for kids who need to appeal or want to appeal. And then we'll have our induction ceremony virtually in the fall. There will not be an in-person ceremony for NHS, unfortunately. And then kids will know well in advance of like college applications or anything like that. They'll know. I think Kathleen and I said that I think October 1st if off the top of my head, don't have it right now, might be the virtual induction day. So kids will know before they apply to college. Counseling, we are very, very aware and very mindful of sort of the stress this is placing on kids and families. And we want to make sure kids have access to mental health counseling where they need it. I'm less concerned about students who see Bill Gillen and Cap Russo and Aaron Miller and Lindsay Bioki regularly because they have a well-established relationship with those folks and they're used to accessing those folks for help. I'm more concerned about the kid who was going through school just fine and maybe he had a family member die of COVID or maybe his mom's been working at UMass Medical for months on end with no break, and it just now he doesn't understand why he's so anxious and frustrated all the time. So we're really hoping that families reach out to us if they have concerns, mental health concerns about their student. When we go to the website in a second, I'll show you where you can ask for counseling support. That request goes directly to our special ed director, who then funnels it back down to the high school team, to the appropriate person. But this is obviously, our whole country has gone through something pretty significant and everyone's dealing with it in different ways. And kids are sponges and they soak up the energy that adults are giving them, and they're looking to the adults for guidance and for support. So everyone's checking in with their kids regularly. But if you feel like I would err on the side of caution, I would be too quick to pick up the phone or the email if you need support, because we don't want kids struggling out there where they don't need to, where so much in the world is kind of going sideways right now. So we'll get to the mental health request button in a second, but we really, really, really are encouraging families to reach out to us. And if you just want to talk to one of us on the phone because you have concerns, we're happy to do that too. It doesn't mean that we're gonna, just because you reach out to us, it's a mandatory, now my kid's in therapy 1 hour a week every week for the rest of his life. That's not what we're expecting at all. But we do think many kids would have understandable reactions to what we're all going through. We want to just be as supportive as we possibly can be. So there were questions about guidance, and so this is why we waited to this point. So Ms. Miller and Ms. Bioki are working. They're actually in work right now, working on schedules. They pushed that email out today to kids, so all the kids know their schedules at this point. And they are doing all the regular guidance things. So talking to seniors about college, working through the college process, helping them with that, helping them with the Common App, helping them with all the the things that go into college, and certainly this year assuaging fears about, oh my God, what is UMass going to think, because last year I had 7 classes on my schedule and now I only have 4. And Lindsay and Aaron will be able to talk kids and explain to them that it's going to be fine, and the colleges will be notified about the change in our schedule. Obviously, kids don't have any control on it. We have a pretty good track record with getting kids into competitive colleges, so I'm not really concerned. that this is going to change our standing at all. I think, like we mentioned earlier, colleges are dealing with the same thing that we're dealing with now. And so they're acutely aware of the challenges that we're all facing, and that everyone's doing the best they can and pushing the kids as hard as we can within a reasonable expectation, so that they're doing their best work and they're the best candidates they can be for college. So I have zero worries that anything that we're doing in Sutton is putting kids at a disadvantage. I think our kids who are in Sutton who are going to be applying to colleges are going to be in the same position as they always have been and as everyone else is right now when they're applying to college. So I would not be worrying about for college and block schedule and AP and all that. I would just be having your students focus on doing the best they can, to get the best grades they can, work hard in their classes, and their talent will speak for itself and they'll do just fine. If now the schedules have gone out, someone said something about why I only had 3 classes on my schedule. Well, that's probably because you have a conflict and you need to fill in with something else. And so that's going to require you to have a meeting with your guidance counselor. That also was shared in the email that got sent to students today. So if you have a hole in your schedule, like you have an A block, a C block, and a D block, but you don't have a B block, reach out to Ms. Miller or Ms. Bioki, and they'll set up a Zoom meeting with you and you can work through the options and so you can switch your schedule. Kids were actually sent the master schedule today as well. So they can see and they can actually kind of figure out maybe what they can make work on their own. Because sometimes it's like, oh, I want to be in video production with Mr. Lev, but it happens at the same time as my pre-calculus class. Well, can I move my pre-calculus to D block and then that allows me to take video production B block? Sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes the answer is no. It's not a perfect system, and we're a small school. We have limited offerings, and we do the best we can to give every kid the opportunities they can. We do have additional VHS seats. If students want to take advantage of those seats, that's something that we have available for kids on a first come, first served basis, and those are available as well. So,
Mr. McCarthy, I got booted, but I'm back.
Oh, you're booted. Oh, yeah. Welcome back.
Can students meet with guidance one-to-one during remote by scheduling an appointment?
Yes, that's right. I don't know if you just got back, but I just said that little thing.
Okay, perfect. Sorry. How many VHS classes can students take?
Students can take 1 VHS class, and then if they're going to take an additional VHS class, they pay out of pocket for that. I believe the cost for a VHS class is $725.
Okay.
All right, so let's go through the rest of these sort of odds and ends for students and then answer all of these questions.
Are SATs and college stuff in your other odds and ends?
I'll address it.
Perfect.
The college stuff I just did, the SATs I did not.
Okay.
So this email tomorrow, it's actually today, so they should have gotten their schedule. Contact guidance if they have questions. There are some classes that have supply lists, and if there's a specific supply list, we'll reach out to those kids. So for example, art. So if you're students in Art 3 and Art 4, I think Ms. Craig is going to be providing supplies from the school so the kids can take that stuff home with them and they can work on the projects, the more advanced projects at home. If you're students in Art 1 or Art 2, Ms. Craig is going to provide, like, if you want to buy smart supplies, here's a reasonable amount of money to spend. But if you don't want art supplies, here's how you can do the project with limited art supplies. So she'll provide that. You know, another class that we're trying to make sure the kids have the opportunity to take is graphic design. That's a pretty popular class in our school. Graphic design with Mr. DeZago requires specific software that's downloaded onto the computers in the school. Obviously, that can be problematic. So when the kids go home, so if your son or daughter has a device, we'll be reaching out to you with a list of the software that needs to be downloaded onto your computer at home. It's usually very easy to download. If you don't have a device that's able to download those pieces, we will be giving out the desktops from Mr. DeZago's computer lab. So for kids who are enrolled in graphic design, they could have that desktop in their home and they could use it as an additional device. So there are some classes with specific supply lists, and we'll reach out as needed. You may or may not know this, but we are a bring your own device school. So that we do encourage kids to bring their own device, and we've done that for the last 8 years. I would say over the last couple of years, I definitely have seen an uptick with people bringing their own laptops in to use, which has been great. We're definitely recommending that kids bring their own laptops in if they have the ability this year. Obviously, with contaminant factors, We're going to be limiting the amount of paper that's passed. And so a lot of the work that happens in class will be on the screen. So kids might be collaborating, for example, on the same Google Doc. They might be working on a PowerPoint presentation on the same Google Slides. So that's all going to be happening on a computer. So if you have the ability to send your son or daughter in with the device, we strongly, strongly recommend it, because you're then obviously containing, you don't have to worry about contamination, and it's your device, and you have control over it, and it goes back and forth to school with you. We actually have additional extension cords and charging stations for kids, so that they can charge their laptop, but then if they need to recharge the computer by third block, they can plug that in and get their device charged. I'm going to skip back to school in a minute. SPP. So if you have an SPP, if you're a junior and senior, lots of juniors and seniors have SPP. SPP is obviously, it's a student production period. It's not a credit-bearing class. If you have an A block SPP during the 2-week hybrid, we're definitely recommending that you arrive late. Again, that helps with the staggered start. It keeps the number of bodies in the building down to a minimum. So if you can arrive to the start of second period, you would park your car, sign in with Miss Reed, and then go to your B block, and that's A-okay. And on the flip, if you have a D block SPP, you're encouraged to leave early, get out of there early. Again, it limits the amount of contagion in the building, helps with the dismissal times, and so you can leave early. If you have a B or a C block SPP, obviously you can't leave, then you're kind of stuck in the building, and we'll have a designated space for those kids and where they're going to be in those times. The seniors are probably asking and wondering about our senior internship program. Last year, Mr. Marcucci, right before the COVID virus hit, he had placed his 100th senior in an external placement. And then really the next day, we were all sent home. So it was a little bit of a kick in the stomach. We're hoping that we're back in the building by the spring, so that we can give kids that opportunities. One of the things that we experimented with last year, and definitely we will be looking at again this year, is virtual internships and just sort of virtual capstone projects for seniors, so that if they're not able to get out into the community, because maybe let's imagine that things are starting to open back up and the virus is, maybe there's a vaccine or maybe it's contained or whatever, and businesses are starting to open back up, but they might not quite yet want to have an external person at their business, and we want kids to have that opportunity. So we will be looking at virtual capstones for seniors. So some kids actually got trained as a CNA last year, for example, and then went to work in the healthcare field, and we got rave reviews about them. We had other students who, I'm thinking of one student who was interested in fashion. She was taking fashion design classes through the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, and then was transferring those credits into her program, in her fashion design program, which she's going to school now. So there's all sorts of things that we can do creatively with the seniors as we get to the end of the year, but we just kind of need to see what the lay of the land is when we get there. So the final thing is we are creating a back to school video. We're going to we have some student volunteers. If you have a son or daughter who could give up a couple of hours on Friday, we really need some student volunteers for Friday. So what we're going to be doing is sort of producing a video that shows kids how they're going to come in the morning, what school's going to look like, what the cafeteria is going to look like, how they come into class, how they leave class, all that good stuff. Because we know this is obviously not the traditional start to school, and kids are going to have some understandable questions about it, and we'll want to share that with them. We'll also be having student meetings. We want, in this instance, we wanted to have meetings with the parents first, so they had a good handle on what school is going to be like. And then Ms. Korn and I will be having meetings with the kids next week, individual grade meetings, so that they can ask questions. And hopefully, if the video can even be done by then we might be able to share it with them in advance of the meeting, so they can ask questions based on the video. So that's it for this section. Questions on?
Let's see. There were a couple questions about SPPs. What if my student's fourth class in the first semester is SPP? Should we change that?
If you want to. There's no SPP is a class just like anything else. And so if you'd like to take a class and save the SPP for the spring, that's completely fine. Many students are going to take SPP both fall and the spring. If you're a senior in good standing or a junior in good standing, you can, basically you need 26 credits to graduate. In the old system, you have the opportunity to take 28. So because we're doing a 4x4 schedule, you're actually getting an extra class. So you actually have one more opportunity to take a class if you want. So you could actually take the extra SPP if you wanted, and it wouldn't hurt you. So, but that's completely individual choice. That's up to parents and kids.
Okay, so what will the kids be doing in SPP now that they only are carrying 4 classes instead of the traditional 7?
They'll be doing the schoolwork for the additional 3 classes. Like I said, those classes are going to have tests and quizzes and group projects and readings. And with less on their plate, there's more of a reason that they can do even better in those classes. And teachers know that and are going to be expecting for that. We're trying to balance out being realistic during this crazy time that we're all going through, but also holding the bar high. And so there's always something you can do in school. You can be going over your notes, you could be rereading the text, you could be creating new notes, you could be studying with a friend. There's downtime in SPP only if you want there to be.
Okay. Once we go fully remote, will SPP require a Zoom attendance check-in?
I don't believe so. I'm going to check with Mr. Friend. I don't think there's any need. I think if everyone's, since there's no credit, I don't see the purpose of having kids check in, say I'm here, then leaving. But legally we might need to, so I'll have answers for that later on.
Okay. When will the AP refresher classes be for the kids who have their AP classes the first half of the year?
Well, we haven't planned out the exact dates yet. The AP exams happen in May. And so the refresher, sort of like the boot camps, will probably happen late April, close to the exam. So they're kind of getting the information. My guess will be, though, that the AP teachers in the fall will be giving the kids, when they leave, things to do that kind of just keep their mind sharp as they have the ability.
When will Mr. Friend release specific criteria to get the children back into school?
I answered that question earlier. I don't know. I don't have the answer for that. Like I said, the school committee and Mr. Friend are working on it. And that information will be shared out when it's available.
Yep. Okay. I think that's it for my questions. Oh, hold on. Okay. What does the full remote model look like when school reopens? Thank you for resubmitting that one. That was when I got kicked out.
Oh, and don't forget we didn't address SATs. So don't let me forget.
Yep. That's on my list.
Okay. Full remote model. So let's pretend that we've gone through let's call it November 1st, and now we're all coming back into school. But you're a parent and you're still not comfortable with sending your kid back into a risky situation. So in that situation, we would be working with you to marry your student schedule up with a combination of online vendors, VHS, and Sutton teachers. It just depends on how many kids we have who are looking at full remote. Obviously, so for example, if we only had one junior who wanted full remote, we can't hire one Sutton teacher to teach one junior the rest of first semester English, math, science, and social studies, and then also a second semester, slate of classes as well. In that situation, we would probably be pairing with some sort of combination of online vendor or the Greenfield Virtual Community Charter School that the state's offering up. So that's what we do in that instance. But if you don't say, if we come back and you're not going to be sending your student back, that's when we'd have to have individual meetings with individual kids and families and coming up with a schedule that marry the two things the best we can.
Okay. Will there be a meeting for seniors and their parents to go over deadlines and any other information that we need?
I'm going to guess you're talking about college information, and my guess would be yes. There will be a college meeting with Ms. Bioki and Ms. Miller, because we always have that senior meeting. It's usually one of the first meetings we do. So that will probably be sometime in the first week of school, or first couple weeks of school, I should say.
Are the seniors going to have an opportunity to work on their college essay as soon as they get back to school?
Yep, but if your student was a student in Mr. Marcucci's class, and I believe actually Mr. Loss's class too, they actually did their college essay last year in English class. So they can continue working on it. I don't know if Mr. Wandice, who's the senior English teacher, has that loaded up. I can check in with him about that. But I'm 99.9% sure that the last assignment of the year in junior English was drafting and creating a college essay.
Okay, what about the fun stuff? When are the kids getting their yearbooks? And what about things like picture day and stuff like that?
Picture day, I believe, is impossible because of the contamination issue. Yearbook, there's actually, Mr. DeZago, there's an email that I didn't open. I believe Mr. DeZago has a date for the yearbook. We obviously, everything got backed up. And then we needed to add in the rolling rally stuff from last year. We've sent out a couple emails about the yearbook that we will let people know when it's ready. And hopefully I can send out that email sooner so I can answer that question.
Okay. I think we're clear to talk about SATs now.
Okay. So SATs, from what I gather, the SAT is still planning on going forward. I don't know how it's happening given the restrictions, but I guess it is. Students can sign up for the SAT and then take it at a local site. Currently, we are not planning on offering the SAT in Sutton. I can check with Mr. Friend to see if that's something he wants to pursue. Again, there's sort of logistical challenges about offering the SAT because of the space requirements and how many kids are taking them. And there's also there's no way to offer a Sutton only SAT. So if we were to offer the SAT, it goes up on the SAT calendar for everyone, and all kids in the world could sign up to take their SAT in Sutton. So then you're bringing contaminants from all over into Sutton for schools. That's obviously a concern, and it doesn't necessarily mitigate the need for the Sutton kids to take the SAT. I'll do some more work on the SAT this week and come back with some additional information. But right now, we're kind of in a holding pattern with that. If students want to sign up for the SAT, they can through the College Board website. And, it might mean that you'd have to drive a little bit further than you want to for a testing spot. But that's the available option at this point.
Okay. All right. So there's just a note in here that SATs for this month have been canceled. Answered if Sutton could host SATs already. Okay. So now, like, the parents are just commenting on how, like, kids were supposed to take the SAT in March, and now it's rescheduled in November. Is there an SAT prep class done in Sutton?
There is. We have a really good relationship. It's called Cotter Simplified Test Prep. He offers a class just for Sutton kids. I've shared that link before. I've got to remember, and will you remind me to share that again? I'll share it on the Sutton Facebook page, the Sutton High School Facebook page. He's a great guy, and the course is pretty reasonably priced, and it's actually a lifetime membership. So if you take it once and you want to come back and like just do the math section again or just the English section again, I believe it's free or a very reduced price. So his name's Justin, and he's a very workable guy. So I'll try to post that information on the Facebook page. And if I forget, because that happens at my age at this point, some parent can email me and say, hey, can you share the SAT prep course? And I can do that, no problem.
Okay. Do you know if they're going to open up more times? It seems that they're all filled. And then do you know if they're going to offer closer locations? Because someone's son, the closest location offered was Quincy. So
I don't control College Board. I don't know what their plans are. That would be something that you'd have to reach out directly to College Board. Again, like someone just mentioned that the latest SAT was canceled. Colleges are aware that College Board's canceling SATs. The situation that we're in is the same situation that everyone else is in, trying to get into an SAT testing site right now. We're not at any different of a position than every other kid who's trying to take the SAT at this point.
Can you just repeat the SAT prep teacher's name again? Sorry.
The name of the site is, I think it's Sutton SAT Cotter Simplified Test Prep or something. I don't have it off the top of my head.
Okay, well, we'll get that out to families.
I apologize.
No, it's okay. And do you think there's a chance that prep course might be offered virtually this fall?
It will be virtual. I gotta believe it's virtual because we're not allowed to have outside folks come into the building. So, and Justin and his staff would be outside folks. So it would have to be virtual, is my guess.
Okay. I think that's all the SAT questions. Couple other questions that popped up in here. When and by whom was the decision made to run sports in person and other extracurricular activities virtual?
There's been no decision to run sports in person. That's a decision that gets made by the school committee on Monday. And the virtual clubs and activities was just what we were doing in response to the pandemic. If there's a way to hold a particular club and activity in person safely and the advisors want to do that, then that might be something that we explore. But there has been no decision to run sports yet, so I would hold off on that question.
Okay. All right. Okay. So, all right. If only one student out of the junior class wants to go remote, this parent is confused why you chose 2 weeks hybrid and full remote after. So why did we choose the model of 2 weeks hybrid and then full remote after? It seems that parents want in-school learning. And can you give the specifics on percentage on how many chose full in school?
The original, so like there's a lot of questions in there. The original survey of what parents wanted, I believe was 90-10. Or 80-20 or something like that. I don't have the exact information, but it was overwhelming that parents wanted their kids in school. I can tell you the overwhelming desire of the staff is that we want kids in school. And then the decision was made to switch to the remote because, as Mr. Friend explained at the school committee meeting a few weeks ago, the lengths through that which we are required to go through to have students in the building all but kill what school really is. And so that decision was made to go remote. As I said earlier in the presentation, remote school is going to look a lot more like school than the hybrid version of school. So that's my belief, because kids will be having a 5-day-a-week schedule with a full schedule in class the whole time. The better educational outcomes will happen in the remote model is my belief, because in the hybrid model, there's so much work that's going into making sure that no one's giving the disease to someone else, that it gets in the way of a lot of the traditional things that we do in school. So that's all I can say about that. The decision about hybrid versus remote is above my pay grade, but I am very confident that in both situations, kids are going to get the best education that we can provide, and they're going to be set up for success. Like I said before, ideal left a long time ago. And we're just trying to make the best of the situation that we have in front of us with the realities that we have to face. And I think that when the kids are in remote and they see, and the parents see, that it's a full online experience, just like the college kids are all about to have, it'll settle in real quick, and the benefits will be pretty evident.
Just so I don't forget, this is a good suggestion. When we're working on SAT stuff, in the coming days, there's a suggestion to look into SAT school day. It allows the school to offer the SAT to only their students on a school day, not a Saturday. So that's something we could look into.
No, I did not know that, and I will look into that.
Perfect. Okay. I think I covered the chat for now.
Okay.
Did you want to show the website?
Oh yeah, I do. Thank you. So I need to. Can I escape? So a couple times during the presentation, I mentioned the website that we've developed that kind of like houses all of our COVID stuff. So it's Sutton High School Reopening 2020.weebly.com. It was shared with you in the email invite to this meeting. And here on the website, it just has some helpful information. It has the specific plans. It also has, I mentioned a couple times, the health guidance. So that's right here, the health office protocols that can answer some of the questions we have about the health and safety procedures. And then it also has this additional section over here, student resources. And so, for example, if you're home and you have a school issued laptop and it's not working, here's how you get tech support. I mentioned the counseling. Here's how you get counseling support. Like, again, that will go to our special ed director, and then she funnels it back to us. And then health questions, if you want to reach out to Michelle, you can click on this button and it takes you to the page where you can email her directly. So it's just an additional resource that we have for families. because we know like trying to get all this information from all over the places can be challenging. So we're hopeful that by kind of putting it all in one spot, it asks, answers some questions. So that's the website. All right, with that, I'm going to stop sharing. And it's a final call for any questions from the chat.
Oh. We got
No?
to thank you. No.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to stop recording. So thanks again to everybody for your questions. We really do appreciate the feedback and the comments because it helps us do a better job for the kids. If you have specific questions, please email me specifically or Ann, and we will reach out. I'm happy to pick up the phone. A lot of these things are just better done in an actual conversation, and I'm happy to do that. So please reach out if you have any specific questions, and we're happy to help. So I'm going to stop recording at this time, but Ann and I will hang back here in the meeting for a few minutes. And if anybody has a kind of a specific question, we'll be able to answer. So thanks again, and have a good rest of your summer.